Hello, hello, and thank you again for coming back again. This is it's going to be our third podcast, and we got some incredible guests that'll be here in the next couple of weeks. But today, we're here with the famous, in my view, Akira Fukudu, and I have Sensei here because of his positioning on the national team and his leadership that he has done for many years. With the junior national team, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, both junior, senior.
Both juniors and seniors. And so I asked Sensei if he would give me his resume. And unfortunately, the podcast is only like 40 minutes, so I can't read everything that he gave me. Sensei is a well-accomplished martial artist, and I'll say some of his accomplishments, but also educationally. All senseis tell their students when they say, what's important in karate? And I'm one that says education, formal education, stay in school, go to high school, get to your college. Because when you become a black belt, and God willing, you become a sensei, wouldn't it be nice to say, I've got a master's in this and I got a PhD's in this? And guys like me from the old way never got that opportunity. We went this way for training and military service, but I missed out on that, being able to be proud enough to say, I've got a bachelor's in this and a master's in this. But as I'm reading his resume, I'm going, that should have been me. I don't have that. So Sensei is a well-accomplished, well-educated, formally educated sensei and coach, and I'm just simply proud to have him as one of my guests on my podcast. Sensei, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Well, first of all, Hanshi, thank you for this opportunity. This is a game changer in our karate community, to be honest with you, to have people like you to be effective with our society and our community here. Podcasts, as you know, these days are one of the social medias that are really, really, really popular, and it gets to many, many different types of populations and demographics and so forth. So I'd like to thank you so much for bringing me over here.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. So I will give you a little glimpse at his accomplishments. So his name is Akira Fukudu. He is a Shihan, born in Hawaii, but his residence is Orange County, California. Been training for 40 years, although he looks like he's 19 years old.
Thank you.
I don't know what he's drinking, but it works. He's been training for 40 years, years in competition, 10 years under Team USA. Not just competition locally or even nationally, but on the team, which is very impressive. He is, as far as coaching, 12 years as the USANKF coach, which is very impressive. He's a 7th Dan in Shukokai International. And Sensei, we're just talking about that. What is Shukokai International?
Well, Shukokai, the organization, was founded by Chojiro Tani, and it's actually the formal name is Taniha Shitoru. And it is an organization that is based out of, the real origins actually is based out of Osaka, Kobe, Osaka. And my sensei, his name is Kunio Miyake, and he is the head of Shukokai International. Shukokai, if you look at Shukokai itself, it's Taniya Shitoru, but we have a heavy influence in Goju. Tani Sensei, Tani Sensei was a direct student of Miyagi Sensei. And then from there, when Miyagi Sensei went back to Okinawa, he actually brought another instructor. His name was Mabuni, and he learned Goju from Mabuni. And then after he finished university, he confined in Mabuni. He says, I want to learn Shurite. Mabuni says, quote, why don't you learn my style of Shurite? Hence, his study of Shitoru.
Wow.
He was actually the first person to receive the Shihan diploma from Mabuni Sensei. And when he did that, from my research, Tani Sensei says, I'm going to call this Mabuni ha Shitoru, Mabuni's way. And he goes, no, you call it Tani ha Shitoru. So when they started the organization, Shu Cole was, if you take a look at those two Japanese characters, it actually signifies training for all. And so it was like a carport, and they would come and meet and so forth. They trained, they shared ideas. Tani Sensei was a professor, And so he used a lot of biomechanics. He used a lot of mathematical formulations in order to be consistent with his teaching, a lot of methodological approaches. The funny thing, the coincidental thing is my sensei, Miyake sensei, was also a former teacher as well. And so learning with that type of approach was really beneficial, for up until today, actually.
And very rare. And
It's
very
true.
rare to have two professional educators also be headmasters teaching,
It's true.
because most
true.
guys don't have that background. As I said, at the beginning, don't have that background. But our audience is wide verse. It's eclectic. So we've got people that come from judo, jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, taekwondo. So we're out in the net, going to everywhere. They may not know the significance of that one name, Mabuni Sensei. Can you give a little bit of background of who Mabuni Sensei and what family he represents?
Well, Mabuni Sensei is I would say, the heir of Shitoru. He was the student of Itotsu as well as Higaonna, and he learned both Shurite and Nahate, which are the two different types of karate branches that he learned from. One was in fighting, close range fighting, and the other was a little more linear type of fighting. He actually combined the two styles because he saw the benefit of that. And to honor his masters before him, he actually used the characters from Itotsu and Higaonna, put it together, and another pronunciation would be Shito. And he honored that name of Shitoru. Now, they say that it is one of the most successful styles of a style that actually combined two styles together. But the more research you do with Mabuni Sensei and so forth, there is a third style as well. He actually brings in jujitsu in there as well. So that's something that sometimes if you look at competition karate, we tend to forget or we tend to put aside, like what you call the bunkai, kaishaku, the oyo, and so forth. And then we practice the kata and kumite for competition. So I would say that he would be considered one of the biggest architects of karate, alongside with obviously Miyagi Sensei, Higaonna Sensei, Funakoshi Sensei, Itotsu Sensei, and the greats as well. We're talking about migrants that came over from Okinawa to Japan. That was a big move there. Also, Motobu Sensei. It was such a big move where when Japan received these instructors, Dr. Jigoro Kano from the school of judo, Kodokan Judo, when he went to Okinawa to demonstrate judo, for example, he found that this type of art was necessary, something that he needed in his style. Judo is comprised of three different types of segments, right? One, they can say tachiwaza, which is throwing. The other is katamewaza or newaza. And the other is atemiwaza. Atemiwaza is striking. Now, having the grappling arts with throws, ground, and striking makes his system complete as well. Now,
Wow, that sounds like MMA.
it sounds like MMA, but if you look even further back, you look at Motobu Sensei, right? He was going around challenging other people in their dojos. Then you go far back as, well, not far back, but recently, right? If you look at Masoyama, Hayashi Sensei, they would go to other people's dojo as well and challenge them, as you know. I'm not too versed in the Okinawan lineage, but from what I understand, the Okinawan masters and so forth, a lot of them, they were friends. A lot of them were friends and so forth. They shared information. And so you have a lot of exchange of information and so forth. Like I would say the advent of Chibana no Kushanku, for example. I was lucky enough to find out the history of Chibana as well, Chibana Sensei, and come to find out he was a treasurer of Okinawa. So that means, by definition, he knew others that were actually into the Japanese Imperial Army, right? And he actually got exposed even more and more and more to the Japanese systems. And so when he went back to Okinawa, he could either systemize his system, he could actually spread what they're doing and modernize things, or spread it out through these school systems and make it more of an educational base versus a Budo base.
Wow, and that kind of segues into a topic that is always discussed. Sensei obviously gave us a lesson in history, which I wasn't expecting, so added bonus. But it really brings to the forefront someone who is a traditionalist, but is involved heavily, because he's a national coach, in sport karate. And a lot of people in our industry, especially what we call traditional Okinawan and Japan karate, are either on one camp or the other, and there's very few that can transcend both sides and say, I'm a traditionalist, I stick to customs and courtesies and to all the traditions that my sensei gave me, but I also believe that there is a place for sport karate and how that can enhance the ability of our younger people especially, and
Correct.
facilitate something that you cannot get in the traditional world.
For sure.
I'm a firm believer in that also. Sensei and I go way back with our sport karate in Southern California. But what I wanted to ask Sensei was, because the science has changed from your days, because you were heavily involved as a student and a national, international competitor, I fought back in the full contact days in Japan.
Correct.
So I never experienced that here. My sport karate was don't get knocked out, because it was full contact with the Masoyama system. But you were in the modern version
Well,
of
you did the
sport
Masoyama
karate.
system as well?
No, I did Yoshukai karate from Mamoru Yamamoto,
Yeah.
who was the best friend of Yamamoto Sensei and got influenced, as a side note, to leave Chitoru under Chitose Sensei.
You gotta be kidding me. Chitose Sensei?
Chitose Sensei. And then he started Yoshukai karate.
Yes.
And then Yoshukai karate, his right hand was Fujikawa Sensei, and I was studying with Fujikawa. We were both in Chitoru, and when Yamamoto, well, I'm getting off track, I know, but he got me on it. When Yamamoto Sensei got influenced by Masoyama, he started his own style. What was it? Full contact, just like Kyokushinkai.
Of course.
Just like Kyokushinkai.
Here's an interesting thing, Hanshi.
Yes.
My wife, she's from Canada. She was a formal national coach and head coach as well for Karate Canada. Her first style is Chitoru.
Wow. That's history.
Yes.
In fact, when you leave on the front, you'll see a portrait of Yamamoto Sensei in his heyday. Had beautiful long black hair, which is why I have long hair.
I wish I had hair.
Well, you know what, Sensei?
General.
We all have to make a living. I can
Yes,
cut
yes.
a piece of this off and give it to you. But as I was saying, you made the transition from a student, then a competitor on a national scale, international scale, but you still are a traditional martial artist.
Of course.
And you did that transition while seeking higher education. So I'm really interested in your educational background, because it gives the young people that are looking at us and young instructors who are just starting their career and wondering, should I get a formal education, and what should that education be in? How does that facilitate my students? Can you talk a little bit about your educational background?
Yeah, for sure. This is actually a funny story. I'll tell you how it is actually. I have a bachelor's in kinesiology, and I have a master's in education, specifically curriculum and instruction, and then I have a master's in sports psychology and a doctoral candidate in sports psychology as well.
Let me stop you there. For those of you who say, I can't do karate and go to college, there it is.
Well, here's the deal. I wanted to stay in karate for as long as possible. So after I finished university, I went straight back into the master's program to become a teacher. This way I had summers off. I would get off at 3. I could go to the dojo. At that time, I had a few boys and girls clubs running at the same time. And I thought, if I can do this, this would be great. This is a good way to give back to the community. So I did that. As soon as I started doing that, during my competitive years, I ran into a sports psychologist from the USOC at the time, the U.S. Olympic Training Center, and he was from shooting, and he talked about flow, and he talked about like some concepts that was really interesting. I was so excited. Went back to Long Beach State, and I went to my counselor and I said, I want to study sports psychology, and they say, we don't have that, it's not available. You got to be kidding me. Soon after, about a year later, I found myself in South America. I was living there on and off for 5 years. I ran into a gentleman, Mr. Rodriguez, Professor Rodriguez actually. He was the judo coach for Cuba, and he was teaching sports psychology in the Peruvian Federation. And, he would tell me about, these concepts and ideas and so forth, because Cuba, Russia at the time, they were very advanced in sports psychology. And so when I came back here, I held on to those concepts. And then from there, after I finished my work in education, I was a teacher for a semester. And then from there, my sensei says, hey, you've been working really hard and so forth. I know you just opened your dojo. At the time, I was training judo as well as karate. Well, I still do. But my coach at the time, my judo coach at the time, opened a beautiful, I would say, a 4 tatami mat dojo. And so it was actually co-sponsored by the Nikkei Japanese Federation. And so I got to be an instructor there. We ran it for about a year and a half, and I had an opportunity to teach full-time. Now, soon after that, when I joined the coaching staff, one of the local universities here in California, they actually opened up a performance psychology, which is sports psychology with the modern name, performance psychology. I applied in there. I got into the program. When I got into the program, the counselor comes up to me and says, you know what? You have a lot of knowledge and insight about sports psychology. This is going to be a really good field for you. Why don't you get in the program? If you have any problems whatsoever, give me a call. Give me his number. I was not a good student in high school, nor was I. I was an okay student in university, for undergrad. I became a better student in my grad schools. And so when I was going to sports psychology, when I was studying sports psychology, when I still do, I found it really interesting. And so I didn't so much apply myself, I just really got in depth with it. Because everything we did in the dojo, everything we did on the mat, translate directly in theory and in practice. But we could put names in it. And so the good thing is I could relate everything together, and I was fortunate to graduate cum laude. I did not know that would ever happen to me. By doing that, I landed a internship with my university, and actually interned and went for my licensure for sports psychology through that. That was really a big honor. But soon after, I got to see Professor Rodriguez at the Pan American Championships, the qualifiers of the Pan Am Games. The great thing was this is a great time for us, because we went, I would say, close to about 20 years without winning the Pan Americans in kata, for male kata. It was a long time.
We as in USA.
Team USA. We came close a few times. The last person to do it was me, but it was with a big collaboration with the Federation as well, and it was really good to see. Ariel Torres, actually, he qualified for Pan Am Games.
I saw that.
And he's on his way for qualifications for the Olympics as well.
Don't we have a female involved in also?
Yes, Sakura Kokomai as well.
Yeah, I saw that
yes,
also.
Yes. She's accumulated enough points to qualify, which
Fantastic.
is great. Yeah, all we need is the official word now, which is great. These two are great athletes. Actually, all the athletes I work with are great athletes. The great thing is when I saw Professor Rodriguez, I got to see him, and I ran up to him, gave him a big hug, and I said, hey, thank you for everything that you've done for me. He goes, what did I do? I didn't do anything to you. I said, no, you inspired me. And so ever since I spent time with you, I spent the summer with him, and we talked about sports psychology and so forth, and And I said, you know what? Now I went and pursued that career, and I pursued that degree, and this is helping with my everyday life more so than my business and also my coaching. Like karate and like martial arts, right? It's a direct reflection of your life. If you can improve that, you can do anything you want.
Exactly.
And so it helped my efficacy levels of learning. So that's what happened. The great thing is my education is only there because I wanted to become an athlete, and I wanted to stay an athlete. I wanted to become an athlete that was professional. But one thing that I would say that I really discovered was, don't be afraid to become a disciple of your discipline. Before going full-time in karate, I wanted to be a professional surfer. That was true. And so the year that I won nationals is the year I got sponsored. Like, I got my sponsors for surfing. And at that time, you could kind of make your way to the international scene and then start accumulating points. But when I started to go towards a karate route, because I wanted to go to the Olympics at the time, I noticed that the more I got involved with karate, the more other athletes from the realms for like judo, wrestling, cycling. I'm an avid mountain biker, and so we cross with a lot of cyclists, and a lot of cyclists have their masters, their PhDs in exercise science. Wrestlers, they all went to university and they're either teachers or they have professional degrees and so forth. People in track and field. A good friend of mine, he actually is a coach for UCI, University of California of Irvine. He ran track and field in the Olympics for the Philippines, and he has a master's in exercise science as well. So I knew that in order to get better in sport, I needed to really become serious in sport and use this opportunity that I have because I was younger. I had really no responsibilities, so I put my nose down. And like I said, I wasn't a very good student, but I was a great learner. And I was a competitor as well. So I approached it like a competition. I found my learning style. And from there, when I did that, I noticed that I started to get a better grasp on knowledge, a better grasp on concepts, a better grasp on studying. It was a true reflection of not so much my grades, my enthusiasm for learning. So that's the reflection of that. I don't like to read too much, but I do like to study. I do like to do research, but I don't like reading for enjoyment. You see, but
wow.
Yeah, this is the funniest thing.
There's a difference in there.
There is a big difference,
There's a
yeah.
difference.
But because I found out how to actually, those times that you stay after, when everyone's gone at the dojo and you work and work and work and work. You spend a lot of times by yourself, and you got to keep that motivation factor at a high level. There's a lot of self-talk that happens. There's a lot of wandering of your mind. There's a lot of distractions and so forth. Now, if you can get a hold of these concepts, then, number one, you can become a lot more effective. Number two, you can learn a lot more. And the better you get at something, obviously, it shows in the mat. It shows in your test scores. It shows in your life. So that was the type of approach that I took.
Wow, incredible. Sensei, let's segue into, now we know that you're an educator. You're well versed in that area. You are a coach, and you've done that for many years. You're a karate practitioner. Mm-hmm. You have a 7th dan, so you've got all these accolades. But when you were young, you were a competitor. And as a competitor, when I'm looking at your resume, and I'll read some of this, I can't read them all because we'll be here all night. You were the Pan American Games gold medalist, okay?
Correct.
You were the U.S. national team captain, the WKF World Cup, WKF, PKF, and Pan American Games. Uh-huh. And that is, for those that don't know, team captain means they're selected from the group, from the masses and he was the team captain, very impressive. You were a 9-time U.S. national kata champion.
Correct.
So can I say you love kata? Now, here's a surprise. because I'm also surprised when I read it. Normally, what they say in our world is you either got a kata or you got a kumite. Pick which one you want. Because most people, from what I understand, that do incredible kumite ain't that good at kata. Why? Well, he spends all the time doing kumite. Correct. And if you do kata at that level of being 9-time champion, then your kumite can't be that hot because you're spending time with kata. But Sensei has it, I read it, and it said 2-time U.S. National Kumite champion, bronze medalist. So it is possible to discipline yourself enough to study too. I was looking for Kobudo. He doesn't have it because he didn't meet me young enough in his life. I forgive him for that, but let's move on now. He was also on the United States Olympic Committee Athlete of the Year. And now that's very significant because of the quality of athletes, very high, and the quality of coaches having to pick who is the best. Sensei has that in his resume, Athlete of the Year. And he's also then matured into, and all competitors have to make that transition. My competition life is over. At a certain age, it's done. What do I do now? Many people just leave the arts, and I know many that have. They go on and they do other things in life. Sensei, like me, says, no, karate is my life, and I'm not going anywhere. But in the area of competition, his next step had to be national referee, which he has AA license. And for those of you who know what that means, I don't, because I never got a AA license. I think I got a B maybe. So that's the top of the top. So Sensei's resume, not only educationally, but professionally, and also in sports, is A+ all the way down the line. So I wanted to ask him some questions, because I know there's going to be a lot of viewers, senseis especially. Students always rely on their teacher. No matter what a student sees in a video, in a podcast, he'll have to go home and say, Sensei, I got a question for you. I saw the national coach for the USNKF, and he said ABC, right? And what is Sensei going to say? Who knows? So really, this information is, I'm trying to get to the teachers who are sitting out there, especially the young teachers, okay? I'm going to be 72, so I'm what used to be, okay? He is what is now, but behind him, there are thousands of young shodan, nidan, sandan, yongdans, and some of them just starting out to be senseis, open up dojos. And they see all this competition that's coming, especially sport, traditional karate. We're going to the Olympics and the national. There's just so many things to navigate. I want a sensei whose credentials are stellar to give advice to the young guys out there and the young women who want to be senseis, who want to start a sports team, how to do it so you don't have to spin the wheel. The wheel's been already created. You don't have to come up with anything new. Sports, karate is here. Here's a fine example of a sensei who is doing it today in his dojo. So, Sensei, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions.
Yeah, no problems at all. That's great.
Talk about your role as the head coach of the national team, if you may.
Well, I am the USA Karate Kata head coach. We have two departments. For the Kumite head coach, it is currently Coach Brody Burns from Texas, and I am charged of the Kata department. Our role is quite simple. We have to make sure that our athletes are primed, ready to go. The best possible way to make the Olympics, the best possible way to have our juniors start filling in to the U21s at the university levels, and then from there over to the senior levels. Far as the training goes, our country's really big. We have 50 individual countries in one country, 50 states, and the training methodology, the training systems are all different. Luckily, because of my kinesiology background and the sports side background is really important there, I can understand different approaches and so forth. And we use the WKF and the USA Karate guidelines to help guide ourselves with the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee to make sure that we're on the right track. Basically put, we make sure that our athletes are at their best possible chance of standing on that podium at the end of the day. For kata, because of the different styles, and there's different trends also. One of the biggest trends when I was competing was the transition from Shotokan to Shoru to Goju. It was doing that a lot, and they added in Ryu, but it was adopted through Shoru. Right now, we have a bigger transition, a bigger trend that they're actually using a heavy influence of the Okinawan system, Shorin-ryu, Okinawan Goju, Uechi-ryu, etc., Rue-ryu. Now, the lucky thing, because I was raised in Hawaii, my father is from Japan, from Tokyo, Japan, and so, but I was raised in Hawaii, and there's a big population of Okinawan practitioners there.
Yes, sir.
There's a lot of family styles as well, and so the Shorin-ryu is something that we grew up with. We saw that constantly, and we saw Kushanku done so many different ways. In fact, it was such a way that we would go and train with masters like Teruya Sensei, Shioboku Sensei, and we would go and train, and they were like friends, uncles, and so forth. And so we'd go and train with them and exchange ideas, So we understood different types of ideologies and what they do, the distances, the timing, and then we understood our style as well. So, I thought that, that time was really special, especially growing up. But at the same time, I thought it was never come up again. And sure enough, it comes up again. I go, you got to be kidding me. What luck is that? Getting exposed to this. And so when the kids come in with their Shorin-ryu katas, even the Okinawan Goju katas, and if you look at, because you have to admit, Goju Kai, Okinawan Goju is a bit different.
Yeah, I'd say so.
The concept's a bit different, right?
Absolutely.
And so understanding like the principles, the dynamics, and the actual ideology in both, right? And the concepts was really, really, really powerful in my part as a coach. I could see something, and I would formalize a question or formalize the actual mythology and go to the resource because I knew who to ask because I was already exposed to that, which is a great thing. One thing that I was really fortunate, I was uchideshi for Miyake Sensei. And so what that is, I was his living student. I was his disciple, direct disciple of him. He is really versed in Shorinji Kempo. It's something that I had to study. I had no choice in studying. And also in Iaido, specifically Eishinru Iaido, right? And so it's something that I had to learn. Not we, but I had to learn. I had no choice about that. Luckily, because of his Shorinji / Jujutsu type of background, and growing up in Hawaii as well, judo is really big in Hawaii. It's a high school sport, and so when the whole Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu craze came in and so forth, I speak different languages, but my Portuguese is like Portuñol. It's like a mix of Spanish and Portuguese. So a good friend of mine, when he came over from Brazil, I met him on the beach because I surf, and his name is Kleber Luciano, and so I was fortunate to learn initially from him. And I looked at it and go, wow, this is similar to judo. And so I was lucky to learn judo as well in Hawaii. And when I came out here, I had an Olympic coach. And then, as life takes you to different places, I actually was fortunate enough to have a silver medalist and one of the supreme judges from the Kodokan, Mr. Takeo Iwami, to be one of my senseis. And learning all these type of ideologies, right? And then you take it and now you apply it to kata or even kumite, right? So now when the rules change to throwing, like, you got to be kidding me. Also in high school, I was wrestling. I was on the wrestling team in high school. I was varsity. I went to state. I wrestled at junior college, and so I loved wrestling a lot. But my chances of going to the Olympics was not there. NCAA, yes, but not for the Olympics. They were just really, really good. I'll be honest with you. But I learned a lot from wrestling, and I actually accredited wrestling and karate was really similar. The reason being, I found out my coach that taught me how to wrestle his name is Steve Hitchcock. His father is Von Hitchcock. He was a former Olympic coach. One of my mentors when I was an athlete, his name was Joe Gonzalez. He's 3-time world champion and 2-time Olympian. The great thing about these two gentlemen is they learned how to wrestle in Japan because the Japanese system of wrestling was immense. So when they came down, and I learned my basic fundamentals from the Hitchcocks, and then when I was training as well, for higher athletics, when I was on the national team, Coach Joe Gonzalez would come in, he would check in with me a lot of times, like, hey, what are you doing for your cardiovascular endurance? Like, I'm running. No, you start mountain biking. Mountain biking, you gotta be kidding me, right? And so he would say, what are you doing for footwork and so forth? What do you mean footwork? He goes, well, this is what we used to do. He brought in his coach in Japan, and he goes, okay, let's see your stances and so forth. This is an athletic stance. We looked at it from different aspects, not just from a karate point of view, like from judo point of view, iaido point of view. We looked at it from, jiu-jitsu point of view, karate, many different styles and lineages from that. If you look at Wado, for example, Wado it's a very, very, very a special style because of their tsuruyashi, the use of tsuruyashi and so forth. But if you compare this with Shorin-ryu as well, it's very similar in footwork, but many people sometimes may not see the overlap, within the two styles. But the great thing is with sports science and with biomechanics, I was fortunate enough to wind up under the tutelage of Dr. John Garhammer in Long Beach State. The reason why I say this is because he was a big biomechanist, and he's actually one of the technical directors for USA Weightlifting. And one of his interns, his name is Sean, which actually is one of the coaches now for USA Weightlifting. I saw him at the Olympic Training Center. He would ask me all these questions about martial arts and combat sports. This is the first time I've ever heard of the term combat sports. So he says, okay, every single movement, there's a formula and there is a concept behind it. Okay, you gotta be kidding me. Once you can figure out the concept, once you can figure out the formula, and once you can find out, then you can find out the mythology, and then you can coach.
Wow.
You got to be kidding me, right?
Wow.
So he goes, yes, everything is rudimentary, everything is fundamental, and everything here goes to skill acquisition. I was like, you got to be kidding me. So when I was under his tutelage there, and when I say tutelage, I was fortunate enough to learn the Olympic lifts through him. And it was like a dojo. It was I was really surprised. Very disciplined sport. And the great thing is, the better I got at it, the better I saw the details, the finite details, and the relationships, the correlation between what we do and what they do. Hanshi was saying about kumite as well. Well, the funniest thing, all my karate senseis, including my father, right? They were fighters. They were great kata people, but they were excellent fighters. They're all Japan champions, and so kumite was instilled in us, and especially in the Shukukai system, Tanya Shitoru, we're known for kumite versus our kata. And there's a lot of world champions coming out of Shukukai system and so forth. But it's a fighting system. But the great thing is the footwork is something that's amazing. So when you start looking at these nuances, you start looking at the actual athletics, right? Athletics of sport karate, like you say, and you look at traditional. There's a big overlap, but there's also things that stand out. One example, okay, like a Zenkutsu Tachi, we can attribute that if you run and you stop, you run like a sprint and you stop still, the stride that you have from there is a Zenkutsudachi. Now, if you walk in a brisk pace and you stop, for example, that's Hanzenkutsudachi. If you walk at a normal pace, you stop, it's a Motodachi. If you kind of like, really take your time and so forth, you stop there, Ayumidachi. And then you ground yourself a bit more, then you have a Sanjindachi. Looking at these aspects in body mechanics, right? And then when you translate this over to someone that's pretty athletic, we found that the learning curve actually goes up faster. And we find that the traditionalists, when they understand that there is some variance within sport and their style, we found that the feedback mechanism actually increases. Wait, I have to stop here. Hanshi, I'm really involved with feedback mechanisms, and I can go on and on and on. I can bore you to death. But I just want you to know.
He doesn't know that I'm taping all this to make a video on this subject, and I'm going to claim all the information he's giving me.
One of the research that I actually I'm doing and did is I would say about close to 10 years ago, when I got on the national staff, I was asked to coach everyone from different styles. Okay, I had 4 days to work with everybody. How am I going to make that successful? Well, there's something called the feedback mechanisms, different types of feedbacks. So if an athlete, simply stated, if the athlete becomes if the feedback, whenever they do a movement and the conclusion of that movement is in a productive way, not positive way, a productive way, then the actual, what they call synthesis analysis, or the precortex of the thought, right, becomes in a place of flow. So in other words, simply put, if the movement is effortless and the movement is not choppy, if the movement is, for example, in a state of like in an elevated state, then the athlete can take new levels and new heights. Remember, you can win a world title at 75% to 80% if you're at a perfect 80%, right? The margin of error is pretty big, but you can also win a world title if you're at 100%, obviously, And so the thing is, creating a situation where if a person comes to me at 80%, if we can give them another 10%, even 5%, with this feedback mechanism, right? And it all depends on different types of personality or archetypes.
Absolutely.
And so if we can find this out, we have actually like a blueprint what's going on. Another person, one of my mentors that actually really opened this idea up to me is Professor Antonio Oliva. He's actually a sensei of my wife. And the more I got to know him as a mentor, a professor, a sensei, and most of all, a friend, a family member friend, the more I started to understand what approach he was taking. And it's really intuitive, and it's really great. It's really consistent. It's worldwide. But I looked at that system and studied it in depth as well. And there's a lot of valid concepts and theories.
Well, I tell you, this is incredible. I had one intention with the podcast with Shihan Akira Fukuda because of his national profile as a national coach, but he's just got so much that I can't do it in one podcast. These are just some of the questions that I was going to ask him, because I know that a lot of teachers out there need this information, especially if you're going to get into sport karate. You don't get in it for the recreation, you get in there so your students can win. And hopefully, like one of my students from the para division, one of my students is on the national team, and I'm very proud of that.
He's a great competitor.
I'm very proud of him. But how did I get my student, a para, into the national? Well, I busted my tail, and I've got a dedicated students, but also I have coaches that help those students. I know one story I could tell, I won't because we're short on time, but Sensei extended himself to my student. At the world level, I couldn't go, but Sensei stood in like a teacher, not so much as a coach, but as a teacher to help my student. So I know there's got to be thousands of you out there looking for that information. How do I get my student to go from this level, dojo training, to the local, to the regional, to the national, and if worthy, if prepared, then beyond that prestigious U.S. team? Our team is going to the Olympics. We should all be very proud of that. We have two specifically. Can you tell me the names of the two that are on the Olympic team?
Well, the WKF has to actually announce who's on the Olympic roster. Okay, they haven't done that yet. They'll do that after the last qualifiers in Paris.
So we can't talk about it right now?
No, we can mention. Now, in my department here, Sakura Kokomai, she is qualified in points. All she has to do is get listed, and then she goes to Tokyo.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, she is our Olympic, I would say, let's just say this, she works hard. You know, we're really proud of her. We really are.
Incredible.
Ariel Torres, for example, from Florida as well. This guy here, I've known him since he was a junior. I've known both of them since they're juniors and so forth. Ariel just finished third in the Istanbul Open. He has a really good chance of finishing the top 3 and going to the Olympics as well.
Wow.
Congratulations
to
both these
both of them.
athletes are an inspiration, and they are, to me, they're on the road to the Olympics.com. That's
Sensei, how about a shout out to those teachers?
For sure. Listen, all teachers out there, before I can say this, I want to say something from the bottom of my heart. I was really, really fortunate to work with the para group for the last, I would say, 4 years. Our para karate national team is one of the best in the Pan Americans, and they are one of the best athletes in the world. Because of my involvement with the national team as well, a mentor, and he's a great coach. He was my coach as well, but now he's in charge of the para department. Is Coach Jeff Cones. I was so fortunate to actually mentee under him. It was these athletes are, I can say this, the true definition of perseverance, mental skills. It's just mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. They can elevate the world championships just in one round. You know, and so I really want to send a big shout out to all those instructors, coaches, even the parents, especially this time of pandemics, right? Many times we get disconnected. Our students get disconnected and so forth, and the coaches and also the senseis are disconnected as well. Many times the parents, I have to say the parents, have a lot to do with the actual growth of the student and the athlete.
Well, you know what? As a side note, and it was, since I didn't know this, and I didn't know he was going to mention, the coach of the para team, who I know personally also, he visited me here years ago, but I've reached out to Sensei Cole, and he has said he wants to be in a podcast. So I'm doing a podcast. That's right, with para.
That's great.
So I look forward. But mention the two senseis of those two great athletes going to, hopefully, the Olympics.
Well, Sensei Robert Young, he's actually originally from Jamaica, and he's done wonderful things with the groups here in Florida, the Miami area. Athletes such as Joseph Martinez, Ariel Torres, Daniela. The list goes on and on and on. Majority of people that are coming from Florida are from Sensei Robert Young.
Wow.
He is actually, I think he's one of your colleagues. You probably know him as well. He's a Okinawan Goju practitioner, and his sense of tradition, and I believe his background is in architecture, so understanding balance, understanding form, understanding static, understanding like different types of, forces that actually, that you can use while moving forward, backwards, sideways, up and down as well, actually becomes a lot more familiar to him, so he can actually expand on that. Inoue Sensei, he unfortunately passed away. As a great loss in our karate community, but he actually is sensei of Sakura Kokomai. Because of him and his teachings and so forth, he's a sensei of Usami Urika, also Antonio Diaz, with Antonio Diaz with also the upbringing from Sensei Javier Mantilla, Coach Javier Mantilla as well. And with Sakura Kokomai, she has a strong and deep root in the JKF system, and she was really fortunate, I would say, to come across teachers like Inoue Sensei and Sakamoto Sensei as well, and mentors like Usami Rika Usami, and the list goes on and on and on. I would say she's a product of progressive karate, progressive kata.
And these names that Sensei is so easily pronouncing, and most of the audience, if you're not from the WKF world, you don't know who these names are. I do, because I've seen their videos on YouTube after they win the World Championships. So he's talking about A-class, Olympic-style type of quality. So we're very proud of the whole national team. And what I've decided, because Sensei is just a wealth of knowledge. Sensei just got too much for me to try to squeeze into one episode. So we're going to invite Sensei back. And let me give you a glimpse at some of the things I wanted to discuss today, but we all have to go to bed at some time. So, talk about his role as a national head coach. I think he touched on that a little bit. Training tips to teachers. Like, I'm 72 and I want to know some of those training tips. I got a couple of young kids that I'm thinking about, and so I need Sensei to give me some tips. What's the advancements in sport karate from my days of simply get out there, moichido, get back up and do it again? There's got to be a lot of advancements in sport karate. How important is the mental outlook? Now, I know this for myself because I believe in the mental outlook, but how important is that in the makeup of a young athlete, even a young teacher? How does a teacher get the mental outlook to be able to vision, to see what is not here today but can come to pass, which is a young athlete trying to get on a national team? So the mental outlook, the mental game is very important in sport karate. Can he talk a little bit about the current U.S. team? How do they train? I know they come from different backgrounds: Shitoru, Wadoru, Gojuru, Shotokan, Shorinru. And they come from all different families, from all different teachers that have different perspective. And then they're placed in the hands of a coach who has to navigate all those different lectures that these students have heard from their teacher and the different approaches to kumite or tokata. How does a coach handle that? And if teachers are interested in getting this information, not only from watching a podcast that doesn't do Sensei real justice in his ability, then I'm asking Sensei, would he come back and put on a Zoom training for people that are just interested in sport karate? We're going to talk about how to win that medal. Simple as that. Results always count. Intentions are great, but unless you walk away with the gold medal, the silver, the bronze, everybody kind of says, I guess that didn't work for us. So how do we get the tips that will increase the probability? Nothing is for sure, but how do I increase the probability and possibility of my student walking away with one of the 3 prestigious medals? So obviously in this podcast, we can't do that, so I'm going to have Sensei come back, okay? I also want to say, in parting, thank you to Sensei and his time. He had to leave his dojo. We're in my dojo, but my class is canceled because of my guest. But Sensei had to leave his lovely wife. Would you like a shout out to your wife?
Hey, Nicole.
Sound like me. Hey, Norma. So thank you to Nicole, Sensei Nicole, and for what she's done to allow Sensei to come over here and share his wealth of knowledge. So we're going to have Sensei back for a second episode. We're going to advertise this so you know ahead of time that Sensei is going to be here. And then we're going to discuss a possible Zoom training. Sensei is also fluent in Spanish. I didn't know that either.
Well, conversational, I would say.
Conversational, okay? So, para todos los latinos en Venezuela, Perú, Chile, Puerto Rico, Cuba, el maestro va a estar conmigo para un podcast, un Zoom training para enseñarle a ustedes cómo ganar el oro. So, thanks to everybody. I want to do this last shout out because I want you to know who's coming May 7th. I've got Michael Jai White coming here May 7th to do a podcast with me. And those of you that may or may not know, Michael was my student at one time. I still consider him my student in Kobudo. And so he's coming back home to do a podcast with his teacher. It's May 7th, which means the following week it'll be released. Sensei's interview will be released in the next 10 days. So I want to thank Sensei. Look, we're shaking. I got the shot and the mouth and everything. We're okay? No virus can hit him or me. The karate is too powerful for that. Thank you, Sensei, again. God
Hanshi,
bless you.
Thank you. Hanshi, it was a pleasure. I'd like to extend my gratitude as well. And your valiant effort to spread and also make something of our karate community, especially during this time of hardship for everyone. One of the most important things that I can always say, whenever I see Hanshi at a tournament and so forth, he has a certain spunk and a shine in his eye. When I came in his dojo, it was really good to see that. It was like coming back home again.
Well, thank you, Sensei. Thanks for everyone to follow the podcast. Remember, TMAI Podcast. Thank you to my assistant, my sidekick, and my producer, Eric. We'll see you next time. Os. Moichido.